somebody like Keating, who's very strategic about it, or Lawson, who just loves it, gesundheit, there are these dialectics, there are these things that have to be balanced in trying to make sense of, what do I do right now? I'm sitting in front of the computer and I'm supposed to type something, or I'm supposed to post a picture. I've got my phone in my hand and I need to connect, engage. What do I do? The first dialectic comes from the problem or fact that this group of people you're addressing, or groups of people you're addressing, are on one hand, they're a community, and fans tend to organize with one another. They tend to have their own ways of doing things amongst one another. They tend to jockey for status with one another so that, you can compare how many bootlegs you have, or how many times you've seen the band in a crew stat, or how early you became a fan, and these are all ways of accruing status with one another. So they're a community, but on the other hand, they're a market. They're the people you need to sell your product to. So how do you simultaneously treat people as a market and as a community? And this comes down, I argue, to a tension between participation, which is what it means to treat them as a community, and control, which is what it means to treat them as a market. So for example, any of you guys know the Norwegian band Turbo Negro? So they've got a really, really, really serious fan culture where they actually have a uniform that they wear. They have a jacket that's branded. They wear little sailor hats. They have a name for themselves. They have chapters. Your jacket has the name of your chapter on the back. They have annual gatherings in Hamburg and biannual gatherings in the United States. So Happy Tom, their bass player, yes, you may laugh because they are a little over the top on purpose, talks about, do you want to be part of a community, which is all about sales? I think a lot of people mix that up. They think we need a community. It's a big buzzword. Well, treat it like a community. Treat it like something you're part of, not a sales channel. It's not a TV shop. That's something we should cherish, like a little baby bird. Right, so here you have somebody saying, treat it like a community, not a sales channel. Harkening back to that quote earlier from Brian Travers about it's about touching people, it's not about selling bits of plastic. So this would be leaning toward participation, right? At the same time, the Turbo Negro jacket costs $100, or if you want it with your chapter on it after applying to the local fan club, you can order one of those, and that's $130. And you're not allowed to clean it, but you can order Febreze and clean it that way. Kristen Hirsch is somebody, she'd been playing that flute way back then. For her, music is all about connecting with God as she knows God to be, and spirit as she knows it to be, and it's a form of worship for her. So she talks about the kinds of activities that fans do, which many other people would want to shut down for violating intellectual property. They would want to control these practices. She talks about them as an honor, right? People come through with remixing my songs, doing time-lapse paintings to my music, films, covers, all that sharing they do, all that effort, all that involvement. It's one thing to be made someone's soundtrack for a while. That's truly the highest honor I could ever hope to achieve. They go one step closer to making the music together by actually making the music together. So for her, it's all about, she's way over on the participation side. And she has actually been supported entirely through fan subscription since 1997. So Amanda Palmer gets all the credit for being the queen of fan funding, but Kristen's been doing it for decades, longer. And yet at the same time, there is this need for control. And sometimes you see that with artists who sue for remixes, try to have them taken down, or people who will have a remix contest within the barriers, the boundaries of the rules that they have set. Or you have people talking about, as Zoe Keating does here, about owning your fan base, right? So she's not talking here about owning them versus them owning themselves, but she's talking about getting people from Twitter to her mailing list so that she can own it instead of Twitter owning it. But nonetheless, the language of owning her fan base is very much one of control and market and containment. So that's the tension between participation and control. A second key tension, one that speaks very much to these questions of identity, is this tension between validation and vulnerability. On the one hand, artists find when their work is out there or when their comments are out there that social media can be very, very validating, or the things that fans come up and say to them after shows. So to give you an example here, Zoe again talks about, I feel like a piece of music really succeeds when it could be a lot of different things. And I get these emails a lot, like, I played this piece when my father was dying, or I played this piece when my son was born, or I played this piece, you know, like there's people who have all of these meanings of the songs and they write to me about them. What I think is so important, there are a few things in here I think are important, but the fact that the emails from her fans are how she finds out that her music has succeeded, right? So it's the validation of her own success to hear from the audience. So these modes of direct interaction offer this means of validation. Artists will talk also about things like, I come back from tour and my wife is mad because I haven't changed the diapers for 6 months, and the kids are screaming, and I'm trying to get breakfast on the table, and then I go to my room and I try writing a song, and I think, why am I even doing this? Nobody even cares. And then I go on Facebook and I say, working on a song, and I get 20 likes in 5 minutes, and then I remember why I'm working on a song. So it might be the validation after the fact, or it might be the validation that keeps them going and motivates them when they feel like no one cares. As scholars, I think many of us can identify this sense of, why am I even writing this? Nobody's going to read it. Nobody cares. The other thing that I think is telling about this quote from Keating is she talked about playing the piece when my father was dying. One of the questions that I asked everybody I interviewed was for an example of an interaction with their audience that they found particularly rewarding. And I often got these stories about death, about somebody listening to the music as a means of getting them through the death of somebody that they loved. So for example, David Lowery, who's in Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker, talks about, I remember this one guy who always used to argue about politics on my Facebook page. And then I noticed he sends me a message directly, and it's about how his mom is dying, and her request is this one Camper Van Beethoven song, Take Me Down to the Infirmary. I don't know, he wrote this really interesting note. It was just how his mom was old, but he played Cracker so much, she started listening to Cracker. It was just interesting. We always have these nice little personal conversations now. I was kind of stunned and flattered that somebody would, basically the song she wanted to hear on her deathbed. And it was just, wow, it never really occurred to me that our music could penetrate that far into someone's emotional life. So it's something really primal, especially again when we think back to music's ancient history. Funerals and death was something managed through music, so that legacy still really continues, and this validation of your music got me through death really speaks to that original function of music as helping us get through life's passages and organize ourselves as communities and share in the most basic life and death experiences as a community. On the other hand, being constantly available makes you very vulnerable, right? So one of the examples that I ran across of this, and there are a lot, for example, Lauren Mulvey from the band Churches has been quite outspoken about all the misogyny she gets exposed to on her Facebook page, and I love that she's thinking about identity. She writes that her strategy for it, she is Lauren Mulvey from the band Churches. She reads it and she feels so crushed and so defeated and so hurt by it, and then she says, what would Lauren from Churches do? She'd be tough about it. I'll be like her, right? So she almost disengages from her what she's feeling to her public persona, to give her the strength to handle what her public persona is exposing her private self to. Greta Salpeter from the band runs a Google alert on her name, and sometimes that brings up fan fiction. So she told me this story about running across fan fiction that involved a lesbian love scene between me and a girl who's in a band called The Life, the drummer, Tennessee, who's one of my acquaintances, and I really like her. And it was just this really, really disturbing sex scene between us. And then at the end, you know, all these kids comment on it, and someone says, "Oh, that was very smart and very classy." And then another girl goes, "Oh, what a great pair. I'd never thought of Greta and Tennessee." And that kind of thing just really, really weirds me out. I haven't seen Tennessee yet since I read it, but I'm probably going to feel weird even when I see her, even though she's not involved in it at all. Right? So here's somebody who, I mean, imagine you're doing Google searches on your name and you read some story about you having hot sex with somebody you barely know but kind of like. I mean, it's really quite a violation, right? And there are some artists who are like, "Oh, that would be awesome to have erotic fan fiction written about me." But there's others who stumble across it and it's really toxic and they really feel bad and it messes up their relationships with other people. Or you have Sigrid Baym, who's really nice and doesn't really excel at creating strong boundaries. So, as he says, if people want to get a hold of me, they can. So some people, you just start communicating with people and it can take up a little too much of your time because they write back all the time. And I don't want to be rude, and it just gets a little too friendly. So he feels compelled to keep replying, to keep engaging. So he's not rude, but this is a tremendous drain on his time. So it's not that people are writing erotic fan fiction about him and some guy in another band. It's just that he's trying to be nice, and it's so hard to keep up with all the demands for a personal relationship on him. He talks at another point about how the fans feel that they have a very intimate relationship with him, and then when he encounters them, he doesn't know them, but they feel so close to him, and how that's very awkward to try to manage. And this then speaks to the last tension, which is trying to balance intimacy and closeness with that distance, and trying to find a place that works for you. So you've got Steve Lawson perhaps saying, "They're my buddies, I'm all about intimacy," and he likes to do house concerts, so he likes to literally be performing in his fans' living rooms. And then you've got somebody like, say, Lloyd Cole, who talks about his fan base having become a second family, but not really one that he asked for, a step family. But you can't just, it doesn't have to do with size or fame, which is sort of interesting. I spoke with Roger O'Donnell, the keyboard player for The Cure, and he talks about, I don't like to call them fans, not anymore. They're more like friends, people that are interested in my music and what I'm doing. I get 3 or 4 emails a day, and I'll answer, and I have good conversations with people. So here's somebody who's playing stadiums, who's super famous, and he's totally cool with, let's just get rid of the language of fandom or friends. Right? This is not about distance, this is about closeness. But sometimes that goes too far, and one of the reasons it goes too far is that it's never just the musician and his or her audience. The musician is also embedded in a web of other relationships. And if you're very close to your friends, and then you treat your audience like your friends, then what makes your friends your friends? What makes that special? How much of what's going on in those relationships with your close friends and family can you share with others? So here's an example from Mark Kelly, the guy we saw at the beginning, who plays with Marillion. He got in trouble with his wife because he posted on Twitter that he'd had a vasectomy. He says, I got told off by my wife for posting stuff that's too personal. The thing I got told off about was tweeting that I'd had a vasectomy. But it's like, if you're gonna do it, well, for me anyway, I felt like I had to do some stuff that was going on. It might or might not be interesting for other people. I must admit I haven't done so much lately. Maybe I've gone a bit too far with it now, right? So there he crossed a boundary where it wasn't that his audience thought it was too close, it was that his wife thought it was too close. And you run into this a lot, where Zoe Keating talks, for example, about